Hey everyone, it's ENDYMION, and you already know we gotta talk about BioWare's next game, Dragon Age the Veilguard, which is set to release at the end of October this year. This game has got everyone freaking out over it, and as someone who is a massive Dragon Age fan and really a BioWare fan in general, I mean, I love Mass Effect as well. I've 100%ed many of their games, and I wear my N7 hoodie pretty much every day when I walk my dogs. I gotta say that when I saw the previews for Veilguard, I was not exactly enthused. But now things have gone from worse to, oh my god, this may just kill BioWare very quickly. So let me, a old, jaded BioWare fan, walk you through what is happening, and then we'll talk Concord afterwards. Which, according to new leaks, is far more of a disaster than we originally anticipated. Like, it's so bad, you gotta see it to believe it. Firstly, Dragon Age had a bunch of previews go live recently, pretty much across the board. Every single news outlet has been praising the game, calling it the next big thing, and even places like Games Radar had articles like this that said, early Dragon Age the Veilguard impressions call it a comeback for BioWare, a definite Game of the Year contender, and the series Mass Effect 2 moment. That last part there, that holds a lot of weight. And that shouldn't be thrown around willy-nilly in my opinion, because calling anything your Mass Effect 2 moment now, that really needs to deliver on all fronts to justify that. Because I don't know about you guys, but I consider Mass Effect 2 to be one of the best games ever made, hands down. God damn, I love that game. Games Radar's own preview said the game was, in their own words, I've come to believe that yes, I can and will happily play the latest and greatest Dragon Age for another 10 years if necessary. The story, as much as I've seen, is just as epic and devastating, the companions are compelling, and it's mechanically much more expansive in some ways while tighter in others. PC Gamer said in their preview about Veilguard, it isn't built on the multiplayer trend chasing that plagued Anthem, and from the 6 hours I got to play during a hands-on preview event this month, Veilguard didn't seem to be the buggy mess that Mass Effect Andromeda was either. It has all sorts of features that prove BioWare was listening to its players, and critically, it's BioWare doing what it's meant to be best at. Gorgeous, intense, intimate RPGs. I'll read just some of what Eurogamer said in their article, where they did claim that Veilguard is indeed what they believe to be Dragon Age's Mass Effect 2 moment. Eurogamer said, and I quote, "There's a BioWare game I keep coming back to when I think about the several hours I spent playing Dragon Age the Veilguard, and it's probably not the game you're expecting me to say. It's not Inquisition, and it's not Origins or Dragon Age 2 as if I'd have the stones to say that. It's a game from another series the studio is probably better known for, and it's arguably the studio's best, Mass Effect 2. Just as Mass Effect 2 streamlined the elbowy role-playing of Mass Effect 1, honing it into a pacier cinematic action game, so does Veilguard do this for Dragon Age. There are no pretensions at being an open-world game as an Inquisition anymore. The Veilguard is a narrower, mission-based game, a phrase I heard a few times over the course of the day, and because of it, the pace never sags. Whatever you do, there's a feeling of purpose and shape. Missions crescendo to spectacular boss fights, and the combat encounters that lead to them feel considered and satisfying. Traversal sections are varied with puzzles and zip wires and slides and balanced beams. There's never any dead time, always there's momentum, and at its best, it's a breathlessly exciting ride. To me, it screams confidence, something the Dragon Age team seems to have lacked in the past. This is a series that's grappled with its identity ever since it began, and that's changed hugely from one installment to the next, pulled this way and that by the demands of the time. But here we are with a beautifully baggageless single-player RPG, and a sense that behind it, BioWare is doing what it believes it is best at. And okay, yes, it's notable that lines between Dragon Age and Mass Effect are blurring, whereas before, the teams and games felt distinct, but there's no denying the resulting effect. The Veilguard is good. It's very good. Regardless, I'm elated to see BioWare in this kind of form again. As a cinematic action game, the Veilguard roars with quality. And as a role-playing game, it provides a welcome refreshment to the density of Baldur's Gate 3, which it will no doubt be compared against, though perhaps it would be better considered a complement to. Based on what I've played, I've absolutely no doubt the Veilguard will be an enjoyable ride. My only concern is how much of a memorable one it will be." End quote. Like I said, I could sit here reading you all the previews, but they all pretty much just say the exact same things. All of these games websites are saying this is BioWare at its peak again, that it's amazing, and that it's a serious Game of the Year contender if it ends up being anything like what they've already played. Of course, this all sounds amazing, especially for me as a Dragon Age fan myself who knows this world so intimately. I love this world so much. I genuinely find Dragon Age's version of dark fantasy to be one of my favorite iterations of that genre by a landslide. I am also deeply worried that the game will fail and BioWare will die and then fall into ruin if the objective reality has anything to say about it. You've likely already seen some screenshots of the character creator and more, so let's get into that now, shall we? Because this seems like it may be a game that is amazing all around, but of course, like always, they have to annoy players and pander in some way. For those of you unaware, in every Dragon Age game you can make your hero how you want. Hair, face, beard, whatever, it's up to you. Even in Origins and Inquisition and now Veilguard 2, you can also play as multiple races like human, dwarf, elf, and Kunari. However, in Veilguard's case, the character creator seems to be the major contention of problems for most people, so let me show you why that is. In Veilguard, you're able to customize your main character, whose name is Rook, in a lot of ways, and that's really just scratching the surface. Beyond the usual stuff like hair and your face, you can also add things like top surgery scars. Yes, this is real, I'm not kidding. BioWare has added the ability to give your Rook top surgery scars for trans player visibility. This addition has pretty much single-handedly derailed the entire conversation surrounding Veilguard in a split second. All the BioWare is back baby posts have become naught as players realize that this game would indeed be championing the very things they've been fighting against all year and then some, but it goes beyond this. You can also find sliders to change your skin pigmentations in various ways, including vitiligo or vitiligo, I can never say it right, but anyway, which immediately made people just roll their eyes aplenty. Since it seems like these days modern dev studios have a weird hard-on for things like that being involved and implemented, I mean, there's even an overweight lesbian character in Dustborn with the same skin condition. And these varying physical traits are paraded around by modern day devs not only in games but movies, TV, and especially advertisements too. They use these things like top surgery scars, skin disorders, and more as ways to champion and prove that they're indeed being inclusive in all ways. Yet of course the character creator has equally been getting flack for not actually being representative of all types. For example, some eagle-eyed players pointed out in previews that Rook cannot be busty or have a massive butt. As you can see on screen here, this is Rook with the chest size cranked to maximum, and it's barely any different than the average chest size available in the character creator already. Players have also pointed out it rings true for your Rook's butt as well, as seen here with the glutes option maxed out on purpose, that Rook's behind barely protrudes out whatsoever, and I think this is legit criticism, considering if the game wants to add things like top surgery scars or skin conditions, why not allow everyone to be shown in the game then? For example, I'm a bigger guy, I work out a lot, I weigh 250 pounds myself. It's pretty obvious based on this character creator that I would be unable to actively portray myself in the game correctly. And for example, my girlfriend is a curvier woman. She too couldn't portray herself either because her dimensions would technically be impossible to achieve using BioWare's character creator here as well. It seems like to me that BioWare is selective in their willingness to allow players to have true character expression. Yet if you criticize the top surgery scar option, you'll be called a bigot. But if you criticize the lack of butt or chest enlarging, you're also going to be called a bigot. It's a lose-lose situation, and it's very obvious that BioWare, well, they are catering to a very specific crowd here with this game. But it's more than that, because of course there's also your preferred pronouns, which are, like always, something else that you can freely choose between as well. And we know there's options for male, female, and even non-binary like pronouns available when you play Veilguard. It's also hilarious that in this screen cap here, there's a player that sets their Rook to non-binary, yet the description reads, Rook's gender reflects how he sees himself, does not affect gameplay. He sees himself, yet you allow for nonsense like non-binary to be chosen. It's so ridiculous, I know. It's the Starfield pronoun fiasco all over again when thousands of players dogpiled onto Az from heel versus babyface. when he said that you can't play a modern Western game these days without these developers pushing modern dayisms, or current day as puts it, into your face all the time. And he's right, because that's definitely what this is. Of course, people will say, well, don't choose it, which is fair enough. However, the implementation of it at all emboldens other games to further commit and push in this lunacy in the future. As even commented on Veilguard's pronouns and all that, to which he said, current effing day, and I mean, yeah, he's right. People attacked him, but he's been proven far more times than he hasn't been in the last year since Starfield's release. If anything, things have just gotten more goofy as time has gone on, it seems. Epic Mike also had a good way of putting this all into perspective. He said via Twitter, imagine designing a fantasy world full of magic and dragons and all manner of imagination, and all you can think about is having scars from top surgery and correct pronouns. What a sad, miserable existence.
But he, him, she, her, and they, them, and then your gender is man, woman, non-binary. Love that. Love the inclusivity. Top surgery scars are also included in this for all of our trans and non-binary rooks out there. I absolutely was blown away by this. It's beautiful to see the inclusion in the game and to see yourself represented.
I mean, he's not wrong. The game's world has literal magic in it and crazy concepts like the Fade, which is a place that's full of demons because of the fact that dreams are where the Fade is. And then you can pull magic through the Fade using your power to use magic in the real world. This is why the game is likely called a Veilguard, because the veil is what separates the material physical world from the dreamlike magic of the Fade in Thedas. Obviously, the bad guy of this game wants to crush that barrier to allow both realms to intermingle and exist within one another. But why I'm explaining this to you is to say that Dragon Age doesn't need something like top surgery scars in their character creator, when it's literally a game about magic and demons and dreams and whatever else. If someone wanted to change their gender or something in Dragon Age, BioWare could have found a more in-universe explanation to explain how that happens. And this is the key problem here, which is that video games, when they're done right, are designed to allow escapism from the real world. I don't really want to see Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or anyone else that I would be reminded of when I play a video game. I want to play games because I want escapism from the absolute state of this world that we're living in. Unfortunately for game devs, it seems, the real world cannot be escaped when playing video games anymore. Instead, you must be reminded of it every single second of your life, or you're a problem and a bigot. Dragon Age in this sense is committing the grave act of injecting current deisms, as would put it, into their fantasy world on purpose. Honestly, the inclusion of non-binary as a pronoun choice, that doesn't even necessarily bother me that much. But the fact that they're adding trans surgery options in a game where this sort of operation scars and such would not be reasonably available in that world is exactly what I've been saying. It's another game getting current date again. You could have just added a potion or some kind of ritual in order to make it happen. But instead, you decided that your dark fantasy world needed to reflect the real world, and I don't personally think it's better for it. But it's extra stupid and hypocritical because you allow trans men and women players to be seen how they want to. Yet you also, like I showed, nerf and disallow men and women who play it to not be represented accurately either. Considering you made the butt and chest options completely nerfed, and we know why they did this too, I reported on this before, where a whistleblower ex-Naughty Dog developer claimed the female form especially was being nerfed in video games in order to not offend trans players. Which is why whenever you play a westernized game, there's almost never any actual accurate female or male body types. Because if the female character body is too curvaceous, too feminine and bodacious, it isn't representative of trans players. And if a male character is too huge and muscly, it's also not representative for trans players either. So instead of just giving idealized looks for all three avenues that are available, instead everything is nerfed to appease one group that is much smaller than the other two. Which just kind of results in none of the three pathways for your character in a game or the characters surrounding them being able to accurately be what they actually are in real life. So no big muscle men, no bodacious babes, but at least you can have small-chested, small-bootied men and women, but don't worry, at least top surgery scars are available. I hope people understand where I'm coming from here. It's one thing to give one group what they want, but if it's at the sacrifice of the other far larger groups, you have to ask yourself, what are we even doing, guys? And whether these studios want to admit it or not, they need to generate revenue in order to keep making these games. And so far, Veilguard has not done that, considering, according to sources like this one from that Park Place titled, reports Dragon Age the Veilguard retail pre-orders getting stomped by Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. So this yet again comes from Side-Scrollers and Stuttering Craig, who has spoken to his source about this again. In case you don't know, Craig of Side-Scrollers has sources that work in big retail stores that often give him info. He accurately reported that Concord had basically 0 pre-orders prior to release, and then people called him a liar, and then the game came out, and he was proven right. He accurately reported on stuff like Dustborn as well, and now we're here with him and his info on Dragon Age, and Craig said via Twitter. For your information, my retail insider says Dragon Age the Veilguard has 1,069 pre-orders total in their 900 plus stores. To put in perspective, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom has had over 4,400 in the last 2 weeks. So Nintendo's new Zelda game is pretty much beating Veilguard 4-1 in terms of pre-orders. And remember that Zelda is only on Switch compared to Veilguard, which is PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 5. So this is not good. Better than Concord? Sure, but still not good at all. Especially when this is your first real RPG game in the past decade, you kinda need this to crush the sales part of that equation. Of course, previous BioWare devs have come out and said there's nothing to worry about, like Mark Dara. He worked on the previous Dragon Age games and replied to someone on Twitter telling them that Dragon Age's previous game, Inquisition, was actually BioWare's most successful game of all time, selling over 12 million units, and it won Game of the Year, which is true, it did. However, comparing the world of 2014 to now is nowhere near the same. And in Inquisition's character creator, we didn't have non-binary, surgery scars, or anything else being pushed into the game either. So, not a fair comparison, but by the way, let's talk about that too for a second, and hear me out, alright? I am going to wager, and I could be wrong, but I'm going to predict that Dragon Age the Veilguard ends up winning Game of the Year at the Game Awards as well as multiple websites too this year. Now, this doesn't matter if I agree with it or not, I'm just telling you why this will probably happen. I think this year has been, as we all know, catastrophic if you're a liberal leftist cultist when it comes to entertainment. All their games have flopped and so on, we know this, I've extensively covered it already. They very, very clearly need a win. And what a win it would be if Veilguard with their pro-trans stance and such were to sweep the Game Awards on all of the websites. The journalists who've been getting beaten down into the pavement with losses could rise up like woke liberal arts phoenixes from the ashes, and then scream and celebrate that they won Game of the Year, and then they could use Veilguard winning as a own it to the chuds moment as well. And I genuinely do think this will happen. I think the narrative here is being preemptively placed so we can see the writing on the wall. I do think that Veilguard will win Game of the Year. You may say, well, what about 7 Rebirth, Black Myth Wukong, or other games? Those games, to varying degrees, either don't do enough to pander or not at all, especially in Wukong's case. Therefore, none of those games will be winning Game of the Year, anywhere in fact, probably. I think Veilguard needs to win because of what it represents for the gaming journalists and what the industry wants from games in the future, which is inclusion, diversity, and pandering aplenty, and they will likely make Veilguard win on purpose in order to use its victory as proof to secure future deals to push more identity politically driven content in the future, saying, look, a game that has trans character creators and non-binary pronoun language stuff swept the Game Awards. Don't you want more of that? So just sign here and thank you, and now we can go make our next woke game, and then the cycle continues. This will anger some, however, to be realistic, let's look at it objectively. The Game Awards are not decided by the players or consumers of games. They aren't. The awards are distributed and chosen via panels of appointed members within the industry itself. So game devs and personalities that pander to said game studios and devs, they get to personally vote on what they think should win every year. So realistically, if the Game Awards wanted to, they could just vote Suicide Squad as Game of the Year, and technically it would win, and nothing that we say would change that. They could vote and say that Cory in the House for Nintendo DS wins Game of the Year this year as well, but let's be real, Cory in the House should win every year, but then that would be unfair to everyone else, so I understand why it doesn't. But this is how Veilguard will probably win, because the people with agendas will be the ones voting. Therefore, I fully expect Veilguard to win because regardless of its quality, it's the message and what it represents that will ultimately be the reason why it's chosen. I wouldn't be surprised if people on the panel vote for Veilguard, and they haven't even played the game first anyway. They're just voting because their peers are just doing the same thing. I also wager whichever Veilguard companion ends up being the most inclusive or pandering, that they too will get nominated for Best Performance and likely win as well. Because remember that last year that Neil Newbon won for his portrayal of Astarion in Baldur's Gate 3. And that character is easily the most queer-coded character in the game, but the fact that he won over Ben Starr's portrayal of Clive Rosfield in Final Fantasy XVI, that tells you everything that you need to know. Neil Newbon did the voice of Astarion, sure, but he didn't do the mocap or anything like that. Ben Starr as Clive, he did everything. He acted in the scenes, he did the voice, he was Clive in every way besides combat animations. Yet, Clive, which is a straight white male protagonist, lost over a gay vampire that was in voice only. But again, these awards are chosen simply by committee, not by the fans or anything else, so this is why these things happen the way that they do. Therefore, I believe that we'll see a similar moment this year come Game Awards Season 2. So I guess you could place your bets on which Dragon Age companion looks like they pander the most, because that's the one that will probably win. Also, Best RPG and Art Direction will also go to Dragon Age, even though Black Myth Wukong's Chinese art direction was amazing, but it's based, so it won't win anything. Of course, we'll still have the fan side of the awards where we get to pick, and I believe we'll see very different picks on that end compared to theirs. But again, they will use that win as a gacha, even though it's not a good example because, like I said, the choice forbids players from chiming in on who wins Game of the Year anyway. It's the equivalent of that Obama meme, where he's giving himself a medal pretty much. That's what the Game Awards is after all. But I think Dragon Age Veilguard will become a game that is decorated in awards and prestige, but won't save BioWare from financial oblivion. There is a decently big and passionate Dragon Age fanbase, I know there is, but these days games are far too expensive to make, so could enough people show up to make Veilguard the success that it needs to be? Maybe. It is possible. But 1,069 pre-orders over 900 plus stores in America is not good at all, but I guess we'll see. To me, this sounds like Alan Wake 2 all over again. The Game Awards slobbers all over it, but they fail to turn a profit on the game even a year later. I guess we'll see, but for now that's what I got. Now let's move finally over to Concord. So according to Colin Moriarty of Last Stand Media, he spoke to someone who works at Firewalk Studios about Concord and what it was like behind the scenes. And what he had to say was pretty damning, so here's a snippet of Sacred Symbols, their PlayStation podcast, and here's what Colin had to say about it.
I wasn't going to ever talk about this game again, because who really gives However, and I don't do journalism really anymore, as you guys know, and we talk about this a lot. I was a journalist at one time, and I used to break a lot of stories, and these days I don't really grind like that. So the stories that I break these days are usually people, always, not usually, always people coming to me. And someone who worked on Concord reached out to me, and I verified who this person was and went through all of that and talked to this person extensively, for a long time. Ooh. And got some, I think, interesting information that I can share about Concord. I think people will be interested about it. The reason that I wanted to talk about it is because some of the assumptions that I had made about the game were dead wrong as far as how much it cost and how much Sony really lost on it. So the big thing that you really need to know here about this, Concord cost about $400 million to make.
Oh my God.
And the story goes that Concord, by the time Concord was, so in the first quarter of 2023, Concord had basically entered an alpha state. This was before Sony had even purchased the team, but Sony had been working with Probably Monsters, and which was the original owner of Firewalk and Firewalk, probably since late 2020, maybe 2021 at the latest on Concord. The game was in development before that. Up to the point that the game went into alpha state, they had already spent about $200 million on it. It's unclear how much of that money is from Probably Monsters and the original investors into the game and how much of that money was from Sony. There's this term in product development, not only with games, but really with everything. You can manufacture a tchotchke. You guys might have heard of it. It's called minimum viability, or a minimum viable product. Mm-hmm. The idea behind this, or MVP, the idea behind this is that this is what you're trying to achieve, and it's once you cross this barrier, you feel comfortable selling it. It's not that it's the best it can be, or that it's what it's going to be by the time you launch it, because there's all sorts of extra stuff you do to it, but this is the minimum viability. When the game had already had $200 million spent on it and was basically in an alpha form in quarter one of 2023, from that point until the game launched, Sony spent another $200 million on it. The scuttlebutt behind the scenes about Concord is that the game was in a laughable shape when it was shown. Basically, when the alpha was ready to go, and they were kind of being we're ready to kind of get moving towards getting this thing out in the next year or two. It was in such horrible shape that Sony felt like they needed to spend that much money again. So, 200 plus 200 to get the game to the MVP status, not to the status of it being a great game, to get it to just viability. A major expense was having to urgently outsource much of the game to other studios. to finish building the game out. And that two fundamental things were not worked on at all up to the point in which the game was shown in alpha. It's not only about the ongoing cost, which would be in the millions to keep the game going per month, but that the game cost about $400 million to make. Kind of said, like, this must be Sony's biggest loss ever on a game, and it is. It's the biggest game Sony's ever released from a budgetary standpoint from the first party or second party. There are games that are in development right now at Sony first and second party that are more expensive than this. But as of the games that have come out so far, so think about like Spider-Man 2 and so on and so forth. We know The Last of Us Part 2 cost $220 million. Spider-Man 3 is going to cost about $350 million. This game cost more, and they lost all of it.
As you heard, Concord was a $400 million disaster that was meant to become PlayStation's next big IP, which ended up only making around $1 million before it was pulled from the entire world. And this toxic positivity, as it's put, is a big reason why we are where we are in this industry right now. Too many games are being made by insane people who refuse to allow anyone to actually voice their opinions correctly against them. So if something is wrong with the game, it's just ignored, and thus those problems are allowed to permeate and exist until the game is released. This false positivity has led to many games that end up being made for nobody but the people who made it, pretty much. And I feel in ways that Veilguard feels like that as well, although I do think Veilguard will do better than $1 million in revenue in 2 weeks, don't get me wrong. But I don't think the game will explode in sales, but I hope I am wrong in a way too, because I don't want BioWare to die. But I mean this, don't say anything negative during development concept is frankly moronic. Criticism should be allowed, it's how you grow and do better. And Concord is a stark reminder of what can and will happen if you don't make games for people who actually buy them. And we're seeing in real time the destruction and loss of hundreds of millions of dollars because of these kinds of moronic choices. Sure, Concord was inclusive and had pandering and pronouns just like all the other failures, but it still didn't leave a dent in its legacy. And all it ended up becoming was PlayStation's biggest flop of all time, and this is why I'm worried about Dragon Age as well for similar reasons. Players have been rejecting these identity-filled games for a long time now. Does BioWare truly believe that they actually have something that is so good that even the players who are sick of this stuff will still go out and buy it? I guess time will tell. Or will Dragon Age just become the next Concord? It's a very interesting predicament, but let me know what you think as always. But ultimately, I do think that Veilguard will win Game of the Year and be showered with praise. If not for any other reason, then it simply pushes the right politics. But can that fake positivity lead to a promising future that doesn't ruin BioWare and kill the studio and its franchises for good? I guess we'll see, but for now, I think this video is long enough, so thank you for watching. Subscribe and such, have a fantastic day, thanks to my members and patrons, and I'll see you guys soon. Exciting times are ahead, so let's see what the future holds.